You are now watching Sammy D305.
Game of Thrones, Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter. One of the best season finales so far on Game of Thrones. Episode starts off with the trials beginning in the Sept in King's Landing. Loras Tyrell is brung up on his charges, and he ends up confessing to all of his charges and denounces his title, his lordship, and vows to have no children. Doing this spares his life and actually makes him a part of the religion, and he also gets the top of his head marked with the sign of the seven. At this point, Margaery Tyrell is noticing that Tommen and Ciri are not there. Also, Maester Pycelle has been drawn off by one of the little birds, thinking that he's going to go meet with the king, but he's actually meeting inside of Qyburn's lab, and he's killed by the little birds. Then it switches to a scene with Lancel Lannister, and he's being drawn by a little bird deep into the underground areas of King's Landing, and the kid ends up stabbing him, wounding him so he can't walk, and he's crawling along the ground only to realize that he's surrounded in a room full of barrels full of wildfire, and that there's candles at the end that are burning that are going to set it off. Then it switches back into the Sept, and you see Margaery Tyrell figuring out that something's going to go down, so she's trying to get out and warn everybody, but they don't get out in enough time because the High Sparrow refuses to let anyone leave, which ends up in the result of everyone being killed, wiped out. And you see Cersei watching in the distance, drinking wine, and then they switch to Tommen, who was being trapped in his room by the Mountain, who wouldn't let him leave. And once the explosion goes off, the Mountain leaves. At that point, Tommen, I guess, becomes so grief-stricken that he takes his helmet off, jumps out the window, and kills himself. So, that's the last of Cersei's children that dies from the prophecy that she was told by the witch. We then switch to see Walter Frey and the Lannister army celebrating the victory over the Tullys and Blackfish, and during the conversation, you see Jaime get into a bit of a heated debate with Walter Frey about why should they actually let them rule the Riverlands if they have to always come back to come help them, which was a good point. Back at King's Landing, Cersei decides to burn Tommen's body and have the ashes buried along with the rest of his deceased family at the Sept that's been destroyed. After that, they switch to Sam, Gilly, and Baby Sam finally arriving at the Citadel so Sam can start his training as a maester. Then the next scene is back at Winterfell. You see a white raven flying over the landscape, and then you switch to the inside of the castle where you see Jon talking to Melisandre about his past. So when the family used to have feast, he would have to sit to the back of the room while everybody else sit at the table. Then Devos walks in, throws a burnt carving that he gave to Princess Serene, and confronts Melisandre about burning her alive. They have a back and forth. He asks Jon, can she be executed? Jon tells Melisandre to leave and ride south, and if she ever comes back to the north, she will be executed. Then it switches to Jon and Sansa outside talking about the events that just happened, and Jon tells Sansa that they have to watch their back now because they're going to have more enemies than they had before. Sansa apologizes to Jon about not telling him about the Knights of the Vale, and then they have a little moment where Sansa tells him that a white raven has arrived and that winter is officially here, and they look up and kind of smile and then laugh, looking at each other because their father always say winter is coming, and they say winter's finally here. It then switches to Dawn, and you see Ellaria Dawn talking to Olenna Tyrell as they plot together to form an alliance against the Lannisters in King's Landing, since they've officially pretty much declared war against everyone in Don and the Tyrell family by setting off her wildfire bomb. Then, at the last moment, you see Varys walk out. Back in Marine, Daenerys tells Dario that he cannot accompany her to Westeros, being that it will cause a problem in case she has to marry into another family, and the fact that she's going to leave Dario and the second sons back in Marine to help keep the city at peace and help the people elect a new leader. After that, Daenerys goes to go talk to Tyrion. Tyrion asks, does Dario take it easy? And she says, not that easy, but there are no tears about it. As they go and talk back and forth with each other, Daenerys actually presents Tyrion with the new role of being the hand of the queen, and puts the pin on his chest and gives him his new role. The story then switches back to the Riverlands where Walter Frey is sitting at a table eating, being served by a girl that he doesn't recognize. While he's eating, he asks the girl to summon his sons, and the girl tells him that his sons are already there. He asks again, and she says, well, your sons are already here. And he looks down and realizes that he's eating his sons. And the girl turns to him, and it ends up being Arya Stark as she uses one of the Faceless Man's masks. She pulls it off, and she slits Walter Frey's throat. She tells him who she is, and she says the last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die. We then see Sansa sitting near a werewolf tree as Littlefinger approaches her and tries to proclaim his love for her and the fact that he wants to sit on the Iron Throne with her at his side. Of course, Sansa rejects him and tells him no, and says that Littlefinger only looks out for Littlefinger. Even when he declares a house, he switches all the time. So at this point, she really knows not to trust him. We then go to behind the wall where Benjen has decided to stop traveling with Bran and Mira Reed. He tells him that he can't go any further because there's magic and barriers that have been carved into the wall that makes it so he can't cross over. Anything dead cannot cross over yet. So he leaves them and tells them that he's going to keep trying to fight the fight as long as he can. And Bran decides to go to a werewolf tree and touch it to have another vision. And Mira asks him, is he sure? And Bran says, yeah, I'm the three-eyed raven. From that point on, Bran goes back into the vision that he had earlier in the season where he was at the Tower of Joy watching his father ascend the stairs to get to the top. Once Ned gets to the top of the stairs, he sees his sister Lyanna bleeding to death, and he's trying to find a maester or anybody who can help save her life, but at this point it's too late. She makes Ned promise to not tell anybody about her child, because if Robert found out about the child, he would kill the child. So this pretty much confirms the R plus L theory equals J, that Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark are Jon Snow's parents. As the camera pans in on the face of the child opens his eyes, and then it switches to a scene to show that it's Jon Snow back in Winterfell. So there you have it, folks. No more wondering who Jon's parents really are. He is the product of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Back at Winterfell, the houses of the North are having a meeting, and some are saying that they should go back home, that the war's been won. And Jon tells them that no, the real war has not begun yet, and the enemy that is coming will bring winter with them. Lady Mormont declares that all the other houses didn't come to the aid of Jon Snow when the Starks needed them, but she did. And from that point on, she has decided that Jon Snow is the king of the North, being that he has Stark blood. Then the other houses get up and start declaring Jon also is the king of the North, and before you know it, Jon Snow is now the king of the North, while everyone is rallying and pumping their swords and fists in the air, saying King of the North, King of the North. You see Sansa with a smile on her face, but then she glances off and sees Littlefinger, and she stops smiling, probably at that point realizing that she might have to do something about Littlefinger, because he might now see Jon as a threat, being that he is now the king of the North. We now switch to King's Landing, where you see Jaime Lannister just getting home in enough time to see another ceremony of somebody being crowned. And that person being crowned is Cersei Lannister. She is now the queen of Westeros. So that should make for some interesting folly next season. After that, they switch to a scene of Theon Greyjoy on a ship that pans out and shows his flag. And then it pans out even more, and you see a fleet of ships on the water with various flags. But most of the flags you see are the three-headed Targaryen flag with the black sail with the three red-headed dragons on it. As the camera pans around even more, you see ships with the Unsullied with Grey Worm on it. And then it switches out and you see another ship with Dothraki on it, riding on the water with no problem, with their horses on the boats also. Then it pans out even more, you see more ships, and then you see the dragons fly by, and a ship at the head of the fleet that had Daenerys, Missandei, Varys, and Tyrion on it. Now you see that Daenerys has the fleet, the army, and everything she needs to conquer Westeros. So, there you have it, folks. Another season finale, the best season finale so far on Game of Thrones, and another episode down. We'll just have to wait until next season to see what seeds that have been planted now and what they will actually end up blossoming into story-wise for the show. The ratings on this episode, I loved it. It was a good episode, the best one so far. It was almost like watching a movie is the best way to compare it to anything, I guess. And there you have it, folks. That's my review. Until next time.